Valley of the Headless Men. There are few places in the world as wild or stunning or strange as the Nahanni Valley in Canada's Northwest Territories. The valley cradles the Nahanni River, a fast-flowing ribbon of whitewater and sharp falls that cuts through the Mackenzie Mountains. The valley is massive and remote. The entire area is covered in jagged pines, cliffs, canyons, and towering rock formations that jut out from the water. There are no roads near Nahanni. The only way to reach the territory is by air, water, or an arduous hike. Once you're in the valley, should you encounter trouble, help is very, very far away. Despite the dangers of whitewater, wildlife, and soaring cliffs, the beauty of the Nahanni Valley continues to attract visitors, while its natural resources, including reports of gold, have lured adventurers to the sprawling frontier for hundreds of years. But the location has a chilling reputation that has led many would-be explorers to avoid the basin. The Nahanni Valley is better known as the Valley of the Headless Men, or Dead Men Valley. There's no confirmed account of how many visitors have been found dead and decapitated within the canyon, but historical records confirm that the murders stretch back to at least the turn of the 20th century. The bodies were often posed and left in visible areas like the Nahanni River banks, possibly as a warning, or at least as a morbid display. In addition to the brutal dismemberment of visitors, the area is often described as off-putting, uncomfortable, or even menacing by those who have hiked the hills and made it out alive. Part 1. The Death and Decapitation of Willie and Frank McLeod. Brothers Willie and Frank McLeod were a pair of prospectors who shared a hunch. They'd heard rumors of massive gold deposits found in Canada's remote territories. The two decided that the Nahanni Valley would be the perfect place to strike a claim. It was isolated, ignored, and dissected by the Nahanni River, all excellent conditions for finding and keeping a profitable mine. The pair were experienced in their profession and set out with everything they would need: tools, provisions, maps, and a well-studied plan. Willie and Frank went up the river and disappeared into the canyon in 1908. Nothing was heard nor seen of either brother for 2 years. Friends in the prospector community began to whisper about a secret McLeod mine. Many thought the pair might have struck a mother lode. Then, in 1910, a group traveling over the Nahanni River noticed two strange forms lying on the shore. The party pulled onto land to examine the corpses. Both bodies were clothed, dirty, and showing signs of decay. Neither could be immediately identified due to the decapitations. Both corpses were roughly decapitated, then positioned in full view of the river, easy to spot by anyone on the water. The Nahanni Valley already had a reputation as haunted ground at that time, but the grisly murder of the McLeods cast the countryside in a new, bloody light. However, even headless corpses and rumors of ghosts walking between the pines couldn't discourage other prospectors from seeking gold in the valley. Rumors flew about a secret McLeod mine that was overflowing with wealth. Some believed that such a strike might have been the cause of the brothers' death. Men arrived in Nahanni alone and in small groups, hiking the cliffs and floating supplies over the river in barges so heavy with gear that they occasionally sank into the fast waters. Less than a decade after the McLeod murders, another prospector named Martin Jorgensen felt the call of the frontier and the drive to strike gold. Like the brothers, he also felt that the Nahanni Valley was the perfect place to make his fortune. The complete lack of road or rail access to the gorge left Jorgensen confident that he could roam freely among the hot springs and rocky trails without much competition. The Nahanni people, who are native to the location, are notoriously elusive and avoid outsiders. Jorgensen was aware of the fate of the McLeods, but, like so many other prospectors, the phantom glow of hidden riches drew him into the valley. Now, unlike the McLeods, Jorgensen was planning for a long stay in the territories. He brought tools and supplies not just for months, but potentially years. The prospector floated all he needed up the river until he found a flat field among the evergreens. Jorgensen set up camp, then spent a long spring building himself a full cabin. His home was nestled under the soaring valley walls and sheer rock cliffs that caught the sunlight each dawn. Jorgensen spent his days panning at the river and digging for gold. He also took time to fish and hunt. He was often spotted by anyone who traveled the Nahanni. Jorgensen managed to stay in touch with family in the south and often wrote letters. Not long after his arrival in the valley, he wrote a series of letters to confidants claiming that he'd found exactly what he was looking for, a gold strike like no other he'd ever seen. Then, suddenly, the letters stopped entirely. Concerned relatives were able to organize a search party, made mostly of locals to the territories. The group searched Jorgensen's homestead, only to find the cabin burned down to charred timbers and ash. They were able to identify the prospector's body among the ruins, even though he was badly burned and, just like the McLeods, his head had been chopped off and removed. It was never located. Part 2. A Sinister Atmosphere. 3 violent, shocking, and extremely similar murders, all within roughly a decade, moved the Nahanni Valley's ill reputation into almost a curse in the minds of many. Streams and ravines and trails around the canyon began receiving grim names like Headless Creek and Funeral Range. Those who still decided to travel the passage tended to do so in groups and for shorter trips. The massive gold strike that the McLeods searched for and Jorgensen claimed he found never materialized, but prospectors did continue to pull smaller deposits from the earth and the river. Other than the allure of gold, the Nahanni Valley was bursting with both wildlife and gorgeous natural vistas. Fur trappers had been visiting the area for centuries and, in the modern world, nature photographers and aficionados felt a strong connection to the mountains and the waterfalls. But even those only brushing by the canyon often noticed something off, particularly after sunset. "There is absolutely no denying the sinister atmosphere of that whole valley," said Frank Henderson, a geologist and mineral expert who visited the territory in the 1940s. "The weird, continual wailing of the wind is something I won't soon forget," he continued. Henderson made several trips into Nahanni, the last of which involved him leading a rescue party looking for his missing partner, Jack Patterson. The group searched the valley for several days without success. On one of their last nights in the area, the searchers were awoken by a group of local First Nation peoples, the original Nahanni tribe. The Nahanni were there to offer the explorers a warning. They should leave the valley in the morning as soon as the sun was high enough. According to the tribe, they'd spotted pale, unnatural figures moving around the ravines earlier that evening. The search party spent the rest of a sleepless night watching the shadows under the trees surrounding their campsite. The wind, which spent most of that day as a slow, soft wail, reportedly picked up to a cold shriek that continued until the first light of dawn came spilling over the mountains. Not long after the Henderson party's failed search for Patterson, the Nahanni Valley gained new recognition due to visits from the writer Pierre Burton and the explorer and base jumper Jean Poriel. Burton wrote a number of articles about the canyon and river for the Vancouver Sun newspaper. Much like Henderson, he noticed that same sinister atmosphere at times. Some have described it as a feeling of being constantly watched or even followed. There are unexplainable fogs that settle over the valley at times, and those pale figures that the Nahanni warned Henderson about had been noticed by others as well. The area also held secrets under the surface. Poriel set out on a total of 4 expeditions down the river and deep into the cave system that ran throughout the valley. He discovered more than 250 caverns under the canyon, a maze of large hollows and narrow rock tunnels that had to be navigated slowly, crawling on one's stomach while pushing their gear ahead. In one cavern, Poriel found over 100 doll sheep skeletons that, when tested, were found to be more than 4,000 years old. How they got into the cave and what caused their death remains unknown. Poiriel chose to name that particular cavern with its mass grave, Valerie's Cavern, after his daughter. Part 3. The Danger of Nahanni at Night. As the gold rush settled down in the early quarter of the 20th century, so too did the mysterious deaths. However, a steady stream of missing person reports continued to circle around the valley. The countryside was so stunningly pristine and majestic that even the shadow of death couldn't keep visitors away. And, by all accounts, the vast majority of people crossing through the Nahanni National Park were perfectly safe, particularly during the day. The fogs and pale figures and wailing wind seemed to be primarily nighttime concerns, and even then, they were rare. Another murder shocked the prospecting community again in 1946, snapping away the feelings of safety and calm that it held for years. An unidentified miner from Ontario was trying his luck out in the valley, panning for gold for several weeks. His body was found by a party riding the river when they noticed his campsite near the shore. The man's corpse was stuffed inside of his sleeping bag. Like many before him, his head was roughly removed and missing. Moving from the 40s into the modern era, the Nahanni Valley continues to live up to its reputation as a haunted place. A few visitors continue to go missing every so often, while others file a never-ending parade of unexplainable sightings and encounters. Reports of Bigfoot and Wendigo activity in the valley pop up every few years, as well as witnesses claiming to spot amphicyonids, a prehistoric, long-extinct creature that is similar to a cross between a bear and a dog, roaming the cliffs and caverns. The park's hot springs are said to be home to a number of wilderness spirits and exotic cryptids, while its skies will occasionally fill with strange lights. Witnesses have reported glowing falls of marsh fire and even UFOs. Funeral Range, a slice of forest running parallel to some of the river's strongest rapids, has been the site of a staggering number of unexplained plane crashes over the decades. There are sections of the Nahanni National Park regularly closed to visitors or otherwise limited in access by season or year. One popular conspiracy theory online is that those closed or restricted areas are the most paranormally active at any given time, and that park management is both aware of supernatural forces and secretly working to keep them in check to protect visitors. One of the strangest rumors about the valley is that it holds a number of sleeping giants. These creatures are said to be buried deep under the mountains and at the farthest depths of the river and lakes. Ancient and dangerous, the giants allegedly used the hot springs to cook their meals thousands of years ago. The smallest giants would still be able to carry an elk in their palm, while the largest would throw the canyon into an unnatural night when their shadows pass over the mountains. How many of these stories are true and how many are fiction is fiercely debated. The numerous murders, disappearances, and accidents are well documented. Something stalks through the Nahanni Valley, either all too human killers or a primal force of nature walking through a land removed from time. The park is inarguably wild, dangerous, and primeval, but can be navigated safely, particularly for those who go prepared. So much of the valley remains secret, a sprawl of underground caves folding into a honeycomb under dark mountains. The Valley of the Headless Man still offers a frontier to explore, even in a modern world, for those who are willing to walk over sleeping giants and under strange, shadowed skies.